Hello, everyone, and welcome to Scholars Hub at Home. I'm Heather Auden, Director of Alumni Engagement. Thank you for joining us for today's session titled Gender Creative Musicking, Naming and Restoring the World Through Collaborative Songwriting with Trans Young People. Before we get started, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the land that I am on. Because we may not be gathered in the same place, the land I'm about to acknowledge might not be the same territory you are on, so please take the responsibility to acknowledge your traditional territory. As a member of the York University community, I recognize that many Indigenous nations have long-standing relationships with the territories upon which York University campuses are located that precede the establishment of York University. York University acknowledges its presence on the traditional territory of many Indigenous nations. The area known as Takaranto has been caretaken by the Anishinaabe Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Huron-Wendat. It is now home to many First Nation, Inuit, and Métis communities. We acknowledge the current treaty holders, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. This territory is subject to the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement to peaceably share and care for the Great Lakes region. Now, we would like to conduct a poll before our session begins today. So the question that we would like to ask all of our guests today is, how would you rate your knowledge regarding the topic of today's presentation? And it should pop up on your screen right now. And I'm going to give everyone a moment to respond. Okay, thank you. This helps give our speakers a little bit of insight into our audience today and learn more about everyone. Okay, a couple of housekeeping items before we get going. If you do need help with the Zoom webinar, feel free to click on the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Our team, and you can enter a question in there. Our team is ready to help you. That same button may be used to submit questions for our guest speaker to answer during the Q&A period. So you may enter questions at any time during the presentation. And please do note that all your questions and comments are visible to our panelists and staff working behind the scenes. So we do ask that you keep your comments relevant and respectful. Okay. So without further ado, I would like to introduce today's speaker, Professor Cale Reid. Cale is Assistant Professor in the Department of Humanities of the Faculty of Liberal Arts and Professional Studies, where they teach core and elective courses in children, childhood, and youth studies. Cale weaves together their background in music creation, performance, and teaching by conducting research with system-affected young people and adults using collaborative songwriting, storytelling, and singing. So please join me in welcoming Cale. Okay. Welcome, Cale, and I'll be back after your presentation for the Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Heather. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for coming to my talk today. And thanks again to Heather for moderating this event, and to Jenny and Tran, who are behind the scenes. Today, I'm sharing some findings from a small SSHRC-funded project I've been conducting over the past year and a half. And the title of my presentation is Gender Creative Musicking, Naming and Restoring the World Through Collaborative Songwriting with Trans Young People. And I'm going to share my slides with you now. So here we go. Hopefully you can see that okay. So there are three objectives guiding this project. So the first objective is to examine how collaborative songwriting might provide opportunities for trans young people to co-compose and record songs about their lived experiences related to gender identity and embodiment. And the second objective was to promote well-being and a sense of confidence in trans young people through supported creative musical expression and storytelling. And the third objective was to create possibilities for educators and undergraduate students to learn about the experiences of trans young people through their songs and the accompanying curriculum that will be co-developed with research participants. So this project contributes to an increasing body of research that investigates how trans individuals engage in various forms of creative and digital media to make sense of and narrate and reclaim their identities and experiences. So moving on to the next slide. I'm going to do that. There we go. So this project draws on a couple of theoretical ideas. First, it draws on the work of Paulo Freire, a well-known Brazilian educator and philosopher, and specifically his concept of naming the world. To name the world, according to Freire, is to critically engage with it, to identify its structures, understand its contradictions, and work collectively to transform it. Freire argues, quote, to exist humanely in the world is to name the world, to change it. Once named, the world in its turn reappears to the namers as a problem and requires of them a new naming. So naming the world, therefore, involves, quote, a constant unveiling of reality and the emergence of consciousness and a critical intervention in that reality. And secondly, I draw on the work of queer scholar of color and cultural theorist, the late great Jose E. Munoz, and his work in queer cultural production as a utopian practice of hope. So Munoz argued queerness is a structured and educated mode of desiring that allows us to see and feel beyond the quagmire of the present. He theorizes utopia as a kind of queer vision where utopia is, quote, always about the not quite here or the notion that something is missing. Munoz argues that queer art and cultural production are utopian in that they offer us a hope for a future that doesn't yet exist but has the potential to. According to Munoz, quote, queer cultural production is both an acknowledgement of the lack that is endemic to any cis heteronormative rendering of the world and a building, a world making in the face of that lack. So next I'm going to talk about my methods and on this slide in particular, the participants and the phases of the project. So in this study, there were 3 participants and soon there's going to be a 4th participant joining this project. But this presentation actually just focuses on one participant, Miles, who has consented to me using his name when I talk about our work together. So Miles self-identifies as a Black, omnisexual, trans masc young man. He's now 17 years old and he lives in rural Canada, but at the time he joined the project, he was 16 years old. In terms of phases of the project, there are 4 phases. The first was a semi-structured interview that I conducted with each participant. The second phase comprised the songwriting sessions I held with each participant. The third phase involved recording each participant's song in a studio in Toronto with local musicians and a sound engineer. The 4th phase will, which hasn't happened yet, but will include building a set of teaching resources in collaboration with the participants so that educators can use the songs in their classrooms as texts for learning and discussion. And on the screen here, you can see that I highlighted phase 2 and 3 of the project, the songwriting sessions and the recording sessions, because these are the phases I'm going to focus on in this talk today. So throughout August to October 2024, Miles and I carried out 6 60-minute in-person songwriting sessions. I audio recorded those sessions, and then they were transcribed by an undergraduate research assistant. So now I'm going to talk about what took place during our songwriting process. So during the first songwriting session, Miles and I reviewed his interview that we did together, and we discussed what kinds of themes he wanted to focus on in his song and the kind of message that he wanted to convey. During that first songwriting session, I also set up a Word document on my laptop that was split into 2 columns. And on the screen here, you can see a replica of that. So on the left side of the document under song ideas, I typed out stories, experiences, and anecdotes and perspectives that Miles shared with me. And even though I posed sort of general and specific questions to prompt Miles during this point in the process, the songwriting sessions were actually quite conversational and emergent rather than interview-like. And on the right-hand side of the page, you can see under the heading Song Lyrics and Theme, I added the headings verse, chorus, bridge, double chorus following sort of a standard pop rock song format. And you can see that the word theme in brackets follows each heading here. And this is the side where we composed our lyrics. So next, what we did was we discussed the themes Miles wanted to focus on in his song. Then I wrote each theme in brackets for each section of the song, and each theme guided what we would write about in that particular section of the song. So, for example, you can see beside the word chorus on the slide here, you can see the theme is empowerment and trans people as deities. So that's what we use, like that's how we sort of organized our thinking for each section of the song. And so using the narratives and anecdotes that we typed down on the left-hand column under song ideas, we discussed those and narrowed them down and then reworked them into lyrics on the right-hand side of the document. So during these sessions, both of us had acoustic guitars with us. As we worked out the lyrics, we would improvise and sing together. We experimented with different chord progressions and vocal melodies until we found something that Miles really liked. And because he writes a lot of poetry and has composed a couple of songs on his own, Miles would sometimes freestyle lyrics while I played the chords that we chose together. So lots of the lyrics that he freestyled during our sessions also made it into the final version of the song, along with the ideas that we wrote down on the songwriting sheet. He was really actively engaged in the lyric writing process, not only by contributing his ideas and sharing his stories, but also by making lyrical additions, revisions, deletions throughout the whole process. And then also during these sessions, we talked about the kind of feel that he wanted for his song and the genres of music that he's drawn to. One of the genres he really likes, which is a genre close to my heart, which is acoustic sort of protest, singer-songwriter storytelling type of music. And sometimes we would start a songwriting session by swapping songs that we liked and listening to them together. So he shared some of the songs from his Spotify account, and I introduced him to some artists that I thought he might appreciate, like Tracy Chapman and Bob Dylan. We also discussed what instrumentation he wanted for his song, and he decided on drums, bass, acoustic guitar, piano, and cello. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the lyrics. I hope you can see these on the slide here. Here is a portion of the lyrics from Miles' song. So first, I will read these lyrics, and then I'm going to talk about a few of them. Okay. So this is a portion of verse 1. I was born in a disguise. I had to rip it off. Everyone else gets a clear look in the mirror. My reflection's wrong. Me, I had to dig so far to finally like what I see. And I had to lose it all to finally feel like me. I know my name is a right. Body should be free. I was confined by these norms and who they said that I should be. And the chorus is, don't you know that I'm a deity? I hold the balance in society, exposing truth in this reality, but you're trying to hide the magic that's inside of me. Forget my diary. I don't got to justify what set me free. I'm going to change your world entirely. So the opening lines, I was born in a disguise, I had to rip it off. These convey the idea that Miles' assigned gender at birth was an illusion, something imposed on him rather than his felt truth. The metaphor of a disguise suggests not only misalignment, but also an active process of removal, reinforcing the idea that self-discovery requires work, effort, and agency. The lyric, I know my name is a right and my body should be free, asserts the fundamental right to self-definition and bodily autonomy that we all should have. The reference to his name acknowledges the power of chosen names for those who identify as trans, while the assertion about bodily freedom challenges societal constraints imposed on gender expression and identity. And the chorus proclaims the divine power of trans existence. Here, the tone of the song shifts from struggle to empowerment. Declaring, don't you know that I'm a deity, is a radical reclamation of power, positioning trans identity as something sacred, essential, and transformative. The idea that Miles and other trans folks hold the balance in society suggests that trans people are vital forces of truth and equilibrium, challenging rigid binaries and exposing the constructed nature of gender norms and discourse. And the final line, I'm going to change your world so entirely, is an assertion of agency and impact. It suggests that trans people are not just fighting for their own survival, but are reshaping the very fabric of society, challenging norms and envisioning a more just and inclusive world, a queer utopia. During our first songwriting session, Miles was insistent that his song have an overall hopeful and positive tone. He wanted his song to convey what he referred to as ominous positivity. In other words, positivity and joy that is coming for you, whether you like it or not. So now I'm going to share a 2-minute clip from the song, the first verse and the chorus, so you can take a listen to see and hear what it sounds like. Okay, here we go.
I was born in a disguise. I had to rip it off. Everyone else gets a clear look in the mirror. My reflection's wrong. Me, I had to dig so far to finally like what I see. And I had to lose it all to finally feel like me. I know my name is a right. My body should be free. I was confined by these norms and who they said that I should be. You just don't get it how I get it, and I don't think that you ever will. When I realized that I didn't fit in, I'd lost half my life standing still. Don't you know that I'm a deity? I hold the balance in society, exposing truth in this reality. But you're trying to hide the magic that's inside of me. Forget my diary, don't gotta justify what set me free. I'm gonna change your world entirely, I said. Forget my diary, don't gotta justify what set me free. I'm gonna change your world entirely.
So thanks for listening. Miles already possessed a critical awareness of his social reality prior to taking part in this project. His subject position as a Black, omnisexual, transmasc young man provides him this perspective of understanding how white, cis heteronormative power operates in his life and in larger society. In songwriting together, Miles and I worked collaboratively to document the structures of the world that press in on him, such as transphobic discourses and the limitations of binary understandings of gender. In doing this, Miles names the world. Freire describes naming the world as a deeply human act of dialogue and creation and an essential part of transformative learning. It is through this co-construction of language and knowledge and reflection and action through songwriting and recording together that Miles documents and makes sense of his reality while asserting agency within that reality. Miles teaches us as listeners and learners to imagine and enact a different, more equitable reality. He does this by naming the world as problematic, transphobic, and hateful. And then in an act of queer world making, he names his world, restoring himself as a deity and claiming his own space and a space for trans anger, trans power, and trans joy. He counters oppression by empowering himself to articulate his lived experience in his own way, in his own voice. In this way, he challenges the dehumanizing forces that seek to name the world on his behalf. So We Are Deities really imagines a utopian future that is brimming with potential and power and joy. As Munoz might say, this potentiality is always in the horizon and never completely disappears, but instead it lingers and serves as a conduit for knowing and feeling other people. Miles' song allows us to know and feel him and his lived experience. It imagines a collective belonging where trans individuals can claim their divine identities. In the composing and singing of his song, Miles takes up Munoz's call to, quote, dream and enact other ways of being in the world and ultimately new worlds. So by conclusion, I am going to share with you a video clip from the studio. In this clip, we are listening to the playback of one of the first mixes of the song after we had been in the studio all day recording. You're going to hear a little glitch in the playback of the song where the song's been played twice, like over top of itself. That didn't end up in the final version of the song, but the point actually here is to notice Miles' exuberance. Just before I started filming him, he spontaneously jumped up out of his chair and started dancing. He is overcome with trans joy, so much so that he starts to cover his mouth, and I think it's to hold the emotion in. At the end, we chat a little bit about what's happening for him in this moment as he's listening to the song. And he says he's very happy. He high fives his friend who joined us in the studio that day, and he says, I love music. I love trans power. Okay, take a watch. Oopsie. Here we go. Here it is.
You're trying to hide the magic that's inside of us. We're gonna change your world so entirely. Don't you know that we are deities? We hold the balance of society. You're trying to hide the magic that's inside of us. We're gonna change your world so entirely.
How are you feeling right now?
I'm very, very happy.
What do you love? You said you love something.
I love the song. It absolutely eats. I love music too. Yeah, as a whole.
So good.
I love trans power.
It's great. It's an awesome song.
Yeah, there you go.
Totally. And that's the end of my presentation today. Here are a few references that are supporting this project. Thank you so much for listening, and I'm happy to share or to have discussion and have some questions. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you so much, Kale, for such a timely and informative talk, and what a lovely video to end your presentation with. So I do want to remind everyone we have time now with Kale for some questions. So please do use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen if you would like to add any questions to our discussion. I'm going to start off with one. So something that jumps to mind is that ethics boards often emphasize protection, sometimes to the point of gatekeeping research with marginalized communities. How do you ensure that ethical protocols don't didn't silence or overprotect trans youth in a way that undermines their agency, especially given your commitment to positioning them as storytellers and cultural producers?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Heather. Actually, I was thinking a lot about this. I think a lot about this through this project and my research in general with young people. I did have a interesting experience with the Research Ethics Board about this project when I first applied for ethics. And I actually brought that with me to this talk because I wanted to talk about it at some point. So when I applied for ethics, I originally applied for this project so that I could conduct it with children. I think it was quite of a broad age range. Certainly children under the age of 16 and 16 for ethics for young people to take part in research projects. If they're 16 and older, they don't need caregiver consent or parental consent, right? But under 16, the parents have to consent to them taking part in a project. So originally I wanted to have like young, like children, trans children involved and like maybe some youth and young adults, whatever. Anyway, so I got back my original ethics application, and Reb had this comment for me, and I'm going to read it. I'm going to read it out to you. So there are some concerns regarding the use of children under the age of, they said 18, as research participants, as there are diverse laws regarding the legal age for affirming gender identity depending on the jurisdiction. So please clarify under which laws regarding the right of children to determine their gender identity that you'll be carrying out this project. And so when I first read that, I was actually really angry because, and I'm going to tell you, I'll tell you why. And I'm going to also tell you a little bit about my response. But I was angry because my first thought was like, well, I don't actually really care what the laws are across Canada about how young people identify. They get to identify however they want. We don't like put restrictions on cisgender kids and tell them that they're only allowed to identify as cis from a certain age onward, right? So I had a real like sort of visceral response to that. But what I wanted to do was really ground my response in policy and law, like to sort of put that back in a response, and then grounded also in children's rights. So my response was to go to the Human Rights Act, go to the Ontario Code of Human Rights, the Ontario Human Rights Commission, and sort of look up some of these things. And so this is what I said to them. I said, so this project is grounded and governed by both the Human Rights Act and the Ontario Human Rights Code, which protect individuals from discrimination based on gender identity and expression. Bill C-16 in 2017 expanded federal protections under gender identity and expression and prohibits hate propaganda targeting these groups. The Ontario Human Rights Commission 2014 policy further guides the prevention of discrimination based on gender identity and expression. And so, like, neither the Canadian federal or Ontario law specifies a legal age requirement for affirming one's gender identity, meaning such restrictions could contradict equality principles, and since no equivalent limitation exists for cisgender individuals, right? So, and I also said this research is really grounded in children's rights, recognizing that all young people have the inherent right to determine their own gender identity free from age-based constraints. And then I talked about the importance of children as co-creators in this project, and that I would be doing regular consent check-ins, check-ins about privacy and anonymity and well-being throughout the study. And even though I wrote this back to Reb in my revisions when I sent my application back to be reviewed again, I did end up changing the age group for my project, mostly because I didn't want to have to deal with that challenge coming back again if they didn't, agree with what I was saying, right? Which to me is really unfortunate because it meant that younger children could not ultimately could not participate in this project. But I felt it was really important for me to say all of that to Reb to really, make that really clear. And let them know that sometimes I do think Rebs, like the Research Ethic Board, sorry, I keep saying these acronyms. So the Research Ethic Board can sometimes favor like children's perceived vulnerability rather than acknowledging that they all have rights. And, just like I said earlier, cisgender children have the right to identify their gender just as trans children have the same right? So, um, in the case of trans kids, they do have the right to self-identify, like we all do, no matter what the law or policy says. So, and in the end, they obviously cleared my project, but it was a bit of a, I had to do some extra work in that part of the part of the process. So, thanks for that question.
Yeah, I think your answer highlights some of the things sometimes take a policy can take a while to catch up.
Mhm. Mhm.
And yeah, and sometimes to move something forward, you have to make a few concessions, unfortunately.
Mhm. Mhm.
We have a comment for you that it was a beautiful presentation, an awesome song, and the words of Miles were very powerful. So
Mhm.
they wanted to share that back.
Thank you.
And another question that we have is less about the policy and things like that. It's more, or the ethics is more about what inspired you to choose collaborative songwriting as the central research method for engaging trans youth.
Oh yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I before I became a researcher and a scholar, I was a musician by trade. And I have for many years, like especially when I was songwriting for myself, like songs about my own like journey, my own identity, my own experience in the world and sort of social commentary. I really in that when I was doing that work as a songwriter and a musician, I just really discovered the power of expressing oneself through song, and
Mhm.
not only for me, as the person who was doing that and, getting out my feelings and my ideas through music, but also I think for people who were listening to that, especially, as a queer person, saying talking about my life in music and on stages and things like that. I found that to be very powerful, and I think there's a real pedagogical element to that, right? Like, and
Mhm.
so I think there's something really interesting about how we can use other kinds of texts for learning rather than just reading a text. Like a lot of times in university, we like assign students readings, which is great, about
Mhm.
research and things like that. But I also think there's really interesting learning to be had and discussions to be had when we listen to a song and then we talk about people's response to it and how we can attach theory to that. So I wanted to sort of because I'm kind of done talking about myself and song. I don't, I really wanted
Fair.
to, I really wanted to start collaborating with other people to help them
Mhm.
tell their stories in song and sort of help provide a platform for those voices to be heard. Because especially with young people, I think we don't often take their voices and their stories and their experiences and perspectives seriously. And
Mhm.
so for me, it was just a really natural sort of progression of the work I do as an artist. So
Right.
yeah, thank you.
Related to that, um, how do you envision the curriculum building phase translating these deeply personal and political songs into educational tools, but not reducing their complexity or diluting their emotional power, which we all just saw in that video?
Yeah, so we haven't started that part of the project yet. I imagine we're going to start doing it in the new year. But I think first of all, we're going to be collaborating together um, to ensure that their voices and intentions and creative agency sort of remain central to how their songs are framed and discussed in classrooms. Um, for me, I think it's really important, and I'm sure that the youth will agree. Although, I have to have these conversations with them, but that it's really important for me that the songs are treated as the primary text for learning in the curriculum that we develop. So really inviting students who engage with them to listen and engage critically and empathetically with sort of the layered meanings and emotions and context embedded in each piece, rather than sort of reducing them, I think, to like just case studies and data points and stuff like that. So I'm really interested in having students critically reflect on sort of the intersections also of art and identity and systemic inequalities, and thinking about how those things can get expressed in song. Um, and so, yeah, I'm thinking about building in reflection activities, conversation activities, and things like that, and perhaps some writing activities to go along with the songs. So we'll see what happens with the participants when we start working together.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mhm.
Another question from the audience is, first of all, they want to thank you for such an insightful talk,
Mm.
and they want to know what key challenges did you face during your research project, and what recommendations would you offer for improving or building upon this work in the future?
Mm. Key challenges. That's hard. None of them were more logistical, I think, than anything else. Like there was nothing sort of major in terms of like working with the participants. All of the particular participants in this project, the three so far, and there's a fourth one coming on, as I mentioned earlier. They all had a really clear, maybe not clear, they had a strong sense, I guess, of what they wanted to write about. And they had a really, like, in terms of like their agency, their self-confidence and self-esteem, even though they had never really done a professional recording before or been in a studio. All of them had some kind of musical experience and background, maybe a little bit, or at least they were writers of some kind and like they were content creators and things like that. So they were used to sort of creating, right? Um, that's not always typical with my projects. Sometimes I have young people that I'm working with that have zero experience with music at all, or creating music. None of these participants in this project had ever been in the studio and sung on a microphone before.
Mhm.
But
Wow.
that's something I can always work with, and there's always ways around that. And
Mhm.
we can do spoken word pieces with music backdrops, or I can sing along with them, things like that. But I would say like really the only challenge was that two of the participants lived in Australia. And
Mhm.
so the time zone thing was a bit of a juggle sometimes. Um, one of them, we ended up working together on Zoom on weekends, because
Mhm.
that worked best for their schedule. And then the other participant, it actually worked out really well because he was a real night owl and I was a morning person. So because of the 12 to 14-hour time difference, if I worked in the morning, for him it was late at night. So the session for him would start at like 10 at night. I'm like, I'd be in bed already.
Yeah,
And
exhausted.
then we like sometimes we'd worked for 2 hours together, and
Wow.
just because he was really into it, and but so that worked in some ways, but I think in some ways that could be a challenge if you're doing, Zoom sessions across time zones and stuff. I'm just trying to think if there's anything else. I don't think so. Oh yeah, and I guess then recording the Australian participant songs, so that could have been a real challenge that we faced, in terms of getting the recording done. Because at first, when I got this grant, I was unsure about how I was going to get back over there, or like where we were gonna do the recording. And I don't have musical contacts over there, but I do here. But then it was sort of very serendipitous, because I was working with a colleague of mine at U of T on a project where I actually met those youth in Australia, a year and a half ago.
Oh, wow.
And then we were continuing this project in Toronto. So we got another grant together, a larger grant, and we were able to fly them over to be on that project here in
Oh, wow.
Toronto. And then I was able to like, hey, let's go to the studio because you're here and let's do this. And so, we've obviously planned that all ahead of time, but that worked out really well. But sometimes
That's
the
great.
funding piece can be challenging. So I know I'm
Hmm.
supposed to offer advice. I can't remember the rest of the question, but I don't know if I have advice. I think I guess the one piece of advice I have is just really working things out with your participants and having those conversations, planning and making sure that, you can do all the parts of the project, in a way that works for everybody.
Hmm.
So,
Absolutely. Um, what did you find in your research or in your anecdotally afterwards? Did the process of collaborative songwriting influence the participants' sense of agency or self-expression beyond the musical space? Were you able to see anything beyond that?
I'm not sure. Potentially, I think one of them for sure, one of my Australian participants. He was the one that had the least amount of musical experience. He's a writer and a content creator, but in terms of like he'd never created a song before, whereas the other two had, Miles had, and then the other participant from Australia actually also has like a little EP that they created and plays guitar very well and sings and things like that. So yeah, they had done a recording before this one, but on their own. But this one other particular participant from Australia, I think really, yeah, I think he just really blossomed in this project, not only through the like the songwriting part, being able to express himself in song and be
Mhm.
able to bring all those musicians onto the project and be in the studio like in person with these musicians, for him I think was really special.
Mhm.
I also just think it really boosted his sense of like his creative self even more. He keeps me updated on lots of things that he's doing in his life, and he's always telling me about all the new creative stuff that he's doing, and so I think that's really exciting for him. And I think also the mentorship like was
Mhm.
really helpful for him too, like just for us both, identifying under the trans umbrella, if you will, I think was really important, in that relationship. I think all of those, but I
Mhm.
think in particular him. So that seemed really cool.
And building that trust. Hmm.
Yeah, yeah,
I have a couple of related questions that have come through from our audience. So one was again commenting on the joy that was illustrated in
yeah.
Miles' clip, and that it was absolutely contagious. So were there any memorable moments of joy for you as a researcher during this project?
Oh yeah. Like, I mean, even as I was talking about that, I was like talking about his work and watching that and watching him, experiencing that in the studio. Like I started to get choked up. Like it's really powerful. And I think songwriting for me with other people is so I mean, I know it's impactful for them. It's equally as impactful for me.
Yeah.
Like to be able to, sort of assist somebody to bring that story to life in song, like that means the world to me. And because I know what that feels like as a musician, like I know the power of that as a person who used music to make sense of my own identity and myself in the world.
Mhm.
I understand what that is, and I understand that
Yeah.
experience. So I see that in the participants too, and yeah. So I'm just like I just love this work. I love to be
Hmm.
able to do this work. I also feel really privileged to get to hear their stories and to be able to help them bring them out into the world in a musical way like that. That to me is
Yeah.
just total joy all the time, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
So related to that, and to your earlier comment about, creating mentoring relationships,
Mhm.
one of our audience members has asked, do the kids have any follow-up or support after going through this process? If it perhaps opens them up more than they expected.
Mm.
And maybe you could also add what it's like for you to, end a research project and then, but having formed such a connection to it.
Yeah, it's really challenging. I mean, I always I how do I say this? I don't ever say this is it's over. Like, it's I'm on email with them, I'm on text with them. I still keep in regular contact with the young person that's in Ontario here. We live pretty close to one another, and so sometimes we do things now outside of the project together. Like we went to movies together, like things like that. Like so, and the other two, they're in Australia, but we're on WhatsApp together and we connect every
Hmm.
once in a while. So yeah, I do maintain those lines are open.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think that's always a challenge when you're doing this kind of, deep creative artistic work, because it is so there's such a connection that's developed and a rapport, and I feel like, I know these people so much more than I would have otherwise having not done this work. And so I do think it's important to maintain that if they want. I'm always like sort of I remain open to that, and I never close that off. So, and
Hmm.
lots of times I think like participants like continue that. Sometimes they do continue it, and sometimes they just go on their lives and they're great. But
Hmm.
um yeah, it just depends on the participant, but I always keep that door open.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great.
Hmm.
We have so many great questions here, so I might not get to all of them. I'm trying to sometimes blend them if
Hmm.
possible, but a lot of comments again about how great this research is, and for such a compelling presentation. Now, a question back related to you as an artist. In which ways has your research work informed your personal music practice as an artist, or
Oh
has
God.
it?
Well, it has, well, I don't know. It hasn't really, only because I haven't done a lot of my own songwriting in the last while because I've been so busy with this work and then just all my other stuff that I do as a
Hmm.
scholar. I don't even like calling myself a scholar, as an academic. Um, uh, but let me think. I never thought about that actually. I wonder, I'm sure it does in some way, but I'm maybe not conscious of it. Um, I do think that, I mean, I've done other songs. I guess I should say this. I've done other songs that are not research projects, but are collaborative songs with other people. So
Yeah.
I've just because they've had a story to tell, and I've asked them if they wanted to write a song and um, collaborate on getting that story out into the world. So for example, I had a friend last 2 years ago now who was diagnosed with ALS,
I'm sorry.
and I knew her from she was a longtime listener of my music, and we happened to live in the
Hmm.
same city. And I said, hey, like, she had her diagnosis was quick. Things went the progression of the illness moved very quickly, and I said, do you want to write a song? And my intention was like to have something for her to leave behind for her wife and daughter when she left. And so
Hmm.
um sorry.
Take your time.
Yeah. So we wrote a song together, and um we worked on it over a couple of months, and we actually invited the Guelph Rainbow Chorus to sing backup on the song, and the producer came from Toronto and recorded us in the church that they perform in. Together, we recorded the song in the studio. Her wife and daughter came in and sang on the song, and then we finished it before she passed away, and they played it at her celebration of life, and it was just amazing. So I do those kinds of things too. They're not research related, but they're just sort of more
Yeah.
personal in my personal life. So yeah,
Mhm.
good question. Thanks for asking that one. Sorry, but I'm crying.
Yeah, no need to apologize. It's an incredibly special experience that must have been.
Mhm.
It is a great question. These are, again, all great questions.
Thanks.
Um, so maybe I'll take us back a little bit to some of the policy questions. So
Mhm.
one is what policy changes or funding priorities would best support arts-based programs that empower trans youth through creative expression and storytelling?
Can you ask me that again?
Yeah. What policy changes or funding priorities would best support arts-based programs that empower trans youth through creative expression and storytelling?
Mm, I think that's really interesting. I mean, there are lots of the grants that I think in the academic world do support like arts-based research. I think thinking about removing some of those barriers to participation in terms of age of participants would be really helpful, and thinking about more how we can think about young people as like agents of change and as human beings in their own right, rather than
Mhm.
sort of looking at them from like a developmental age-based perspective, right? And so I think thinking about how do we develop like even grants and things like that for the kinds of arts-based projects, I think that help creative expression
Mhm.
be sort of front and center in those projects, um, I think are really important. So
Mhm.
mhm.
Absolutely. Well, we are almost out of time, so I'm going to wrap it up with one more question. I apologize to the ones that we didn't get a chance to get to. One last question is, can you speak to building relationships with community organizations for this project? Was that a part of it? And if so, how important was it?
Can you say that one more time? Thanks.
Sure. Can you speak to building relationships with community organizations for this project in particular?
Yeah, so I think the fourth person that is potentially going to join this project is a collaboration that I'm actually just starting with a youth wellness hub in rural Ontario. And that collaboration has started because I was invited to go to this small town in Southern Ontario a few weeks ago to do a performance
Mhm.
for the youth hub, but also for its sort of like parent organization that supports families in that rural community. And so I went and also did a songwriting workshop at the youth hub while I was there doing my community performance. And yeah, I think building partnerships with um, with community organizations, especially ones that support young people and provide wellness services to young people, are really important. I also want to do a little bit of that work here in Guelph. We also have a youth hub here and things like that. So I think those are really they can be really fruitful, partnerships because they bring a lot to the table in terms of ideas and the kinds of needs that they have. And I think as artists, we can really, those kinds of partnerships can really add a lot to those communities as well. And creating spaces for young people to have a voice and to be able to
Yeah.
express things and even have a say in the kinds of projects they want to be involved in, right? Like having sort of a
Mhm.
more participatory, like approach in our research, I think is really helpful. So I'm trying, I want to sort of think about that in terms of my own work going forward is like, how do I create projects with youth that
Mhm.
address some of the things that they're really interested in addressing in their
Right.
lives? So hope
Okay.
that answers the question.
That's great. So we're going to have to leave it there. Again, lots of great discussion. So thank you to everybody who submitted questions. And Kale, thank you so much for being with us today and sharing that very powerful presentation and all your research with us. So thank you again.
Thank you so much, Heather, and thank you to Jenny and Tran as well for your behind the scenes support. And thanks to everyone for coming
Yes.
today. I really appreciate it. It's a
Yes.
pleasure.
Thanks very much. You're now welcome to turn off your video.
Thank
And Okay, so just a few last things from me before we say goodbye to everybody for today. A recording of this video will be posted to our YouTube channel. We'll post a link in the chat as well. We do have one more poll question for the audience today that we'd appreciate your response to. It is, how would you rate your knowledge of today's topic following this discussion, now that you've had the presentation? And please do join us on November 12th for our next session of Scholars Hub, Muscle Matters, the Importance of Muscle Health in Older Adults, featuring Michael Paris, Assistant Professor of the School of Kinesiology and Health Science of the Faculty of Health. And we'll post that. And we're also delighted to welcome you to the York Lecture Series with topics ranging from emerging sustainable technologies to new ways to control inflammation and arthritis. This series is held 4 times a year in person, and it's open to our alumni community and friends and takes place at 9 a.m. on Saturday, November 15th, and it is on campus. And we'll also post that in the chat, so we do hope to see you there for some in-person experiences. And that is it for us today. Thank you again for joining us, and thank you again to Kale for a great presentation. We look forward to seeing you in our next Scholars Hub at Home session. Thank you and be well.